computer. Go ahead, Margie.
Good morning, friends. We want to welcome our new social work group that is joining us, and I'd like to thank my committee, Elizabeth, and thank her for hosting this Zoom for us. And Lavette, we certainly appreciate you being online today. And I'd like to turn the time over to Elizabeth to tell you about the CEUs.
Yes, thank you, everyone. So if you guys could send me a chat information, I'll ask you in the chat exactly what we're going to be looking for, your name, your email, and if there's a company attached, you can put that as well. If you like us to have your phone number, you can put that there in case there's any questions. But for us to be able to send over the certificate of completion, I'll put that information into the chat. So thank you all. Oh, and yes, Jeremy, we are so pleased to have you here today. There have been overwhelming amount of people that are so thrilled to hear from you, and we are extremely excited to hear about this very unique topic of moral injury. This will be a fantastic opportunity for us to learn from you. So Jeremy, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored and grateful to be here with you all, to spend some time with you and talk about moral injury at the end of life. Both topics I'm very passionate about. Service members, moral injury, anything in that topic is something I'm very passionate about. So I'm grateful to be here. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here.
Give me just a second. I'm trying to find you on the list to make you the host.
So yeah, while we're doing that, I just want to tell you how grateful I am for social workers. I'll give you a little bit of my background while she's given me permission to share my screen. I've been in the military for 20 years now. Kind of strange to think that I could retire anytime. Most of it's been in the reserves, but I have had multiple mobilizations, of which has been to Afghanistan and been all over Kyrgyzstan and Kuwait and different places. And so thinking about taking care of veterans is near and dear to my heart. But to be honest, like as far as doing in-depth counseling and doing in-depth care for service members, most of that's been in the civilian world for me when I was working as a hospice chaplain, but also working as a mental health chaplain. I worked for many years at Salt Lake Behavioral Health. They actually have a specialized program there for active duty service members from the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. They would go to my place of work for about 4 weeks to 8 weeks. And they would receive treatment for PTSD. And so in that process, I would do mostly groups with them. It was treating anything from combat PTSD to sexual trauma related PTSD, and then also childhood related PTSD. And so in the process of that, over the years, I just noticed this extra element, and Brett Litz came up with all his research, like a decade ago over that or so on moral injury and how it differed. And I gained this great interest in the topic. And so I started incorporating the research, incorporating models. And so they actually put me in charge of the moral injury program there. And I ran the programs right next to their CPT programs, kind of one of the main event programs for dealing with moral injury for service members. And so just seeing how to incorporate not only research and empirically based evidence in the practice I engaged in, but just getting experience to see, hey, what works well with service members, as a service member myself to other service members, but what is going to be practical. And so as I get into this, let's see if I have permission now.
Do.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Jeremy.
And then can you guys all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm going to go into present mode here, so hopefully I'll still be able to see comments, but I may not be able to see comments in the chat. So if any questions or comments come in, please let me know. Okay, can you still see the presentation?
We can, yep. And we see it at the next slide as well.
Okay, and that's okay. I know I work mostly with Microsoft Teams, and so I'm not going to play with it now. We'll just go with what we have. And you guys can see the next screen. So don't take away the surprise too much when I go through the slides. So given that, here's kind of the outline. Just want to share some personal experience. It's kind of already starting to get into that. This is just an outline of some of the things we'll go through. Working as a military chaplain in the reserves has been a very fruitful, enlightening in so many senses. But like I said, working in the civilian realm is where I've built most of my experience of moral injury, working with end of life and wide varieties of situations like that. And so deep passion for this. So just before I start off, I just wanted to share like, hey, why do you wear the ski goggles? Just so it's not a distraction, because a lot of people ask like, hey, why do you wear ski goggles? It's not for COVID. It's not because I'm going skiing. It's actually because, long story short, I developed cancer in 2018. They don't know if it was from one of my deployments or what happened. But eventually I had acute lymphoblastic leukemia in 2018. I was diagnosed on my 10-year wedding anniversary. Happy anniversary, right? And so what ended up happening, I had to do months of inpatient and outpatient treatment. It was the most excruciating experience of my life. For one who's deployed and had kids and been through a wide variety of trials, going through the cancer process was extremely difficult. So I say that to say, along the way, I had a rare mutation to the cancer I had, which meant that I had to get a bone marrow transplant. And after the bone marrow transplant, my new immune system now attacks my body with what's called graft versus host disease. And my eyes is the primary place where it attacks. So I get extreme dry eye. They're almost completely dry. I actually have to use these hard contact lenses that attach to my eye. They're bigger than normal contact lenses. You can ask my wife, it's a frustrating process sometimes. This morning, it took me 20 minutes to get them in because I kept failing and getting bubbles in there. And if you get bubbles, it's really painful. And I do drops 20 to 60 times a day. And I wear these all the time. So just to get that out of the way, so whether that was deployment related or not, I still don't know. That's my family. And then you can see my brother there. He was a donor, 10 out of 10 match. So love him and I'm grateful for him. Now life is just, how can I make the most out of it? I do whatever I can, whenever I have an opportunity to do something for service members. I am so grateful. And a double bonus here is getting an opportunity to do something for social workers. Because when I was going through the cancer process, I'll tell you what, those social workers came through me big time, crying my eyes out when I could cry, and just speaking my soul and getting a chance to talk. I met a lot with the chaplains and the social workers and worked through things. And then even after the fact, when I was going through prednisone, I don't know if any of you have been on prednisone, but whoo, that is a powerful drug that saved my life. It suppressed my immune system, but I had to take high doses. The suicide ideation is no joke that comes with that. So later on, I also had to work with a social worker because I asked for help. I knew what it was like to have suicide ideation of just like really intense every night, waking up to have those things. And so I say this to say, my experiences as a service member and going through cancer, I'm so grateful for social workers. The work you do is outstanding, not appreciated enough. So thank you for being you, and thank you for what you do, and thank you for letting me be here. Let's do this. Life is here, and let's make the most of it, whether it's a day that someone has left or 6 months. Let's do this. So I actually made some changes. I did the thing you're not supposed to do. Right before the presentation last night, I made some big changes to the presentation. My presentation looked a lot like a lot of the presentations you see online, very theoretical, empirically researched, evidence-based, looked pretty sharp, but it wasn't practical. And so I made changes last night because I wasn't happy about it. So what you're going to see is the result of the changes I made last night based off of a whim of inspiration. And what I provide to you today, I'm not going to give you as much as the empirically researched evidence, or I will give you the evidence of that, but I'm not going to give you as much as the research and some of the theory and some of the boring stuff that could potentially be. I'm going to give you more of the practical applications, both what I've learned through experience and what I've learned through the experiences of others of trying to deal with this one particular area of moral injury. So there is an opportunity, as you all know, if we're working end of life, as people approach the end of life, there's issues come up. People talk about things that they wouldn't normally talk about, or things that have been hidden. And this is why I use the black light analogy, because there is this thing where you'll have traumatic things happen as a child or during a deployment or during life. We have these things come up and then they tend to slide under the surface. They evidence themselves in one way or another, especially for Vietnam veterans, which we'll get to when it comes to alcohol use, drug abuse, and some other things. It evidences itself. But it's not till people get to the end of life most of the time that suddenly it's like the black light I call it the black light analogy, because that approaching death is like the shining of the black light. Those issues start to come up. People want to talk about their experiences during war as they approach death, as you all well know. So now it's a matter of saying, how can we address this, or how can we most effectively and efficiently talk with the service member who's going through or experienced it in a way that will be beneficial to them, to help them have an honorable death. And I just want to share an example from my grandpa. My grandpa served during World War II, Merrill Brown, 101st Airborne. He saw a lot of combat, and he was just, he had to kill, and he watched some of his friends die. He went through a lot of things. But the one experience that he shared with me was before he was getting ready to die. He was getting in the dying process. He started talking about things that he wouldn't normally talk about. As a teenager, I didn't know what to expect. My brother asked the question you don't ask a service member was, you ever kill anyone? And even though he had multiple killing experiences, he went back to one experience where I think someone's not on mute. There's a little bit of background noise. If someone who's not on mute could please mute. But yeah, my grandpa, they had captured a German soldier. This German soldier spoke good English, and he knew my grandpa, and he listened to information. He said, I'm going to come to America, and I'm going to kill your family. When you get out of the military, and when you go home, I'm going to kill you. And it was like this day after day. So his friends told him, of course, this is illegal. They told him, you got to kill this guy. And so they had a German interpreter who was German descent, who spoke perfect German.
Hey, Jeremy, I'm going to interrupt you for a moment.
Sure.
Everyone, can you please put yourself on mute? I don't think, Jeremy, because of the display of how you have it, that you're able to mute everyone.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I believe there's still some more people that are not on mute.
That's okay, thank you.
Please, please put yourself on mute. Everyone?
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
But my grandpa, yeah. So they tricked this prisoner because they were like, we don't want him to go home and kill your family. So they did something illegal, but they did what they thought was best in the moment. If you're getting to where this is going, you get in that war mind frame, the fear, everything else. So they had this German interpreter come in of German descent, trick the prisoner and say, hey, I'm going to help you escape. And the German interpreter told him, like, don't shoot me, but shoot the second man that comes out. And so I tricked this man, they got him to come out, and they killed him. My grandpa killed him. And this haunted him. When he told me this experience, I was shocked. I had no idea how to respond. There was like fear in my face, I could imagine, as a teenager. But yeah, you could tell it haunted him. He looked off in the distance, and you guys know what I'm talking about. We worked with service members that looking off in the distance, they go back to that place, and I could tell it haunted him. And it made a lot more sense as I learned about moral injuries. I learned about moral injury that connected with my grandpa, because my grandpa was a stellar guy. But that being said, for the rest of his life, he had struggles with alcohol. He had struggles with domestic violence, and he had struggles with prostitution and sexual acting out. When my grandma would go away, he would have a prostitute come to the house. And I'm sharing these things. I love my grandpa. At first, I was ashamed to because I understand this process. But now that I understand moral injury, you know that as you go through these experiences that make you feel like a monster or make you feel like you're not a good enough person, as we'll get to, you're more drawn to activities that are going to that cause more damage to yourself. So I share that now as we get into the Vietnam era, some very specific things. They had some difficulties. I can't believe it. Since the time I was in hospice in 2014, I was dealing with World War II veterans, but now time has elapsed. And I don't know if anyone out there is even still working with veterans who are from the World War II era. And most of it now is the Vietnam, Desert Storm, and even Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. And so there's been a big transition. I'm sure that you all see it when it comes to end of life care. And Vietnam, there's this big amount of distrust. There's a lot of things that comes towards the government and things that they had to go through. Agent Orange, immunizations or lack thereof, the prophylaxis or for tropical diseases. Those are medications you have to take, like malaria pills and things like that, in order to avoid the disease. And they had a higher amount of alcohol abuse and substance abuse, stress-loaded occupations and social behaviors.
Jeremy, I'm going to ask you again. So I've been getting a lot of people asking, please, to mute everyone. There might be a way for you to be able to do that yourself if we can't get people's attention to mute themselves.
Okay, let me see. I'm looking to see if there's a way to mute.
So I think if you go up to view and you click, the view, it's up at the top right-hand corner. and you would click gallery, and you would be able to see everyone.
See, I'm looking for view. I'm not a Zoom guy.
You're fine.
Up here, is it under this part, under where the more is, or is it somewhere else?
It's probably view. Yes, maybe more. What I see is view, and then you select gallery, and then you can scroll down to people.
And that's okay. I don't see a view. I don't have a view on mine. So
maybe up at the top.
Yeah, I don't. That's okay. It sounds like it's quiet now, though. I think everyone's put themselves on mute. It sounds like. I'll tell you what. If it comes up again, I'll turn it back over to you, and you can put everyone on mute if that sounds fair.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. Well, let's keep going. So there's some things that are specific to Vietnam veterans that you all are probably already seeing. And so there's a little more shame. They definitely weren't handled well or treated well when they came home. There's distrust of government, a lot of betrayal that took place. And some people had some bad experiences where commanders were asking them to do things that went against their deeply held moral beliefs, as we'll get to. So keeping that in mind as you're preparing for conversations with folks from the Vietnam era. So PTSD, just a quick DSM-5 definition. As you all know, it's just an anxiety disorder that develops in relation to an event which creates psychological trauma in response to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violation. Whereas moral injury, on the other hand, it's perpetrating, failing to prevent, bearing witness to, or learning about acts that transgress deeply held beliefs. So big things to take away here. You know, you can see different models who kind of highlight this. I'm just quickly doing this because I want to hop into the practical aspects of this. PTSD is more fear-based. Moral injury is more grief and betrayal-based. Really bring it down. There's things that they share, but if you're trying to get into more injury, there's something bad has happened, and it's either something that someone's done or had done to them, or something they had to witness, or something that they felt like they failed to do. And if you can just understand that simple aspect of it, and there's more guilt and shame on the moral injury side, you will take away what I would like you to take away. I'm really boiling it down. There's all sorts of research and literature you can read online on moral injury, but I'm really boiling it down. But I want to get to the practical aspects of it. But just to help understand, you have Jonathan Shea. He's one of the ones who coined the term of moral injury, and he's got some awesome books if you want to look up some books from Jonathan Shea. Great stuff. So PTSD, he compared it to the wound. That's like the wound, the cut, the injury, whereas moral injury is more like the infection that comes afterwards. And if you can understand that analogy, you can understand moral injury really well. Here's just a simple flow chart. Not we all experience some kind of moral pain throughout the day, whether it's, hey, I had to send someone home early, or I didn't attend one meeting or another, or I attended to one patient versus another. We all experience some kind of moral pain. Sometimes it's small, but sometimes that pain is great. And if you compile that, like if you're a service member who's deployed and you're on a convoy and you receive an attack or you are attacked, you know, that's going to create a lot of psychological fear. You know, maybe you had to kill real quickly. Maybe you killed someone in the spur of the moment. Maybe you did something under the fog of war that you'll deeply regret. And then what happens is you usually don't have time to sit there and process it. You have to move on to the next mission. You have to move on to the next place. You have to keep yourself for survival. So you see this moral pain scale. There's this often don't get a chance to respond, and it gets buried underneath and it becomes a moral injury, or it's that infection, as we say later on. For the rest of us, maybe we don't have as significant things take place and we get a chance to process that. But when it becomes cumulative or it's super intense, that's when it has more chance of becoming moral injury. So trolley dilemma explains it pretty well in some circumstances. In the fog of war, whether you receive command, because there were many case studies of this happening, like My Lai massacre and many others, where commanders were telling their soldiers to wipe out a whole village, women, children, everything. So you can imagine, like in the spur of the moment, or where they're being attacked, and it's like, I either kill this family along with the enemy, or I allow myself to be killed. There's this choice that has to take place in the spur of the moment. And so, like the trolley dilemma, it's that, right? You have a train coming. Do you save the one or do you save the five? And people have to make these types of decisions, especially in the fog of war and the speed of combat. And suddenly it's this I have to make a decision. And afterwards, it's that moral reckoning of, what did I just do? And people come home from war, and especially it's different from World War II. You had a long boat ride home where you could meet and stay with your other service member friends and talk and have time to process. But here we're talking about Vietnam, Operation Enduring Freedom. Suddenly, one day I'm in the combat theater, I'm there, and the next day I could be home, or the next couple of days I could be home. So you can imagine not having that time to process how easily this stuff gets buried down. Someone comes home, gets buried down. They go on, live their life. Maybe they have alcohol abuse, maybe they have other issues, but suddenly end of life approaches, and these things, just like the black light analogy, are going to start coming out. And you as a social worker, you as the chaplain, whoever it is that's on this call, has the rare opportunity to meet with these people during the short period of their life. They've had these whole entire lives, and suddenly you have this glimpse. You have this opportunity to provide support to someone who's just now going to be sharing their moral injury. So keeping that in mind. And so, because as we talked about Vietnam veterans, those emotions, as they do something bad or have something bad done to them, or witness something that they didn't speak up for, or someone else did something atrocious and they didn't speak up, or whatever else happened. And that's happened in Operation Enduring Freedom as well, and Iraqi Freedom. But these emotions, it's like a ball underwater. You can't keep a ball suppressed, or that air. It's just that air bubble. It just takes too much energy. It's going to come up one way or another. And then what happens for these Vietnam guys or these Operation Enduring Freedom guys? That emotion, it comes out usually in unhealthy behaviors, because they didn't have an opportunity or as much support, or they didn't trust the VA, because there were some major issues back then. So this stuff got suppressed, this ball. So then it comes out, you can see on the right side more of isolation. I feel like I'm a horrible person, brooding over thoughts, abuse of self and others, domestic violence is big, substance abuse, it could be all these things. Whereas when there's more time and the ability to process, and there's more acceptance, and people feel better about themselves, it tends to go this way. And really, I break it down. I could use the magnet analogy of, hey, I have an internal script or story. If I'm a service member and I've done something horrible, or if I'm a service member and something horrible has happened to me, or I didn't speak up, you can imagine what kind of stories that are built up, those internal scripts. You as social workers, you understand that well, those internal stories when you're working with folks. And we didn't understand as much about it back then, but they've done these things. You can imagine a lot of the stories I hear come out. I'm a monster. I can't believe I did that. I'm a horrible person. And there's a lot of shame, suicide ideation, all those things come out. But you can imagine if that internal story is I'm a monster, what type of behaviors you think someone's going to be drawn to? It's going to be the unhealthy behaviors, right? Whereas like, hey, if I feel like I'm a person of worth, or if I have grace for myself or compassion, there's more likelihood that I'm going to be drawn to healthy behaviors. But you got to know, for Vietnam veterans and some of these other veterans, some of them are good. I'll tell you one thing, like it's not 100% of them. You're going to have some who are actually good. I tell you, I was surprised. Most of the Vietnam veterans talked about how difficult the experience was. But I did meet one man, just to validate the other side, who said he had a positive experience that was really healthy. I was like, floored me. I just wasn't expecting that at all. So I'm not saying this is everybody. Not everybody you have is going to be damaged or wounded. There's some who are going to be very empowered and have a lot of light and have made a lot of meaning throughout their day. And maybe when you're speaking to them and they have experienced more injury, they may want to focus more on I made a lot of meaning, and you can tap into that, as we'll get to in just a moment. So the theme I have, you can see it in I would almost want to stop sharing. I actually have a little thing, because I work as a hospital chaplain right now. It says love them home, because I work with dying patients quite a bit. So love them home is my mantra, love them home. And if you put that in the context of veterans, it's how do I help them have an honorable death? Not doing it for them, but how can I assist them in that process, in the short amount of time I have with them in that end of life, to help them have an honorable death. So I can't go anywhere. I can't share anything with you yet until I even go over a little bit the We Honor Veterans programs. If you're in a hospice company or healthcare or whatever else you're in, if you're not a partner with We Honor Veterans, it's completely free. You can get it set up. You need to start there right away. Most of the resources I get when helping veterans, I get from We Honor Veterans, as we'll get to in just a moment. But they promote veteran-centric educational activities. They increase organizational capacity to serve veterans, support development of strategic partnerships, and increase access to improved quality. They actually have this awesome star system, 1 star through 5 star. If you accomplish like what they have for their standards, you'll get a star. And then when you do the next level of standards of care for your company-wide, strategic systemic wide, you'll get the 2-star, and then it builds up to 5. And it's not only something that ensures that you're providing quality care for honoring veterans, it gives you resources. Your company can use it for advertising to say, hey, we honor veterans. Because as you all know, it's like 80 or 90% of veterans who are going into hospice care or getting ready to die do not go to the VA system. They're not using the VA system. They're using civilian healthcare systems and hospices before they die. So I'm very appreciative that you guys are coming to this training. I hope that you all are a part of We Are Veterans and partnering with them, because there's a lot of people who either don't know the benefits they have at the VA or they don't trust the VA. So it's critical for you where you're at in your civil. If you're not there, go to the website right after this. If you aren't a member, go look at their resources, go start the partnership program. And that's all I'll say on that. So when it comes to this part of you're dealing with a service member, you're providing support to a service member, I should say, who's nearing end of life, it's looking at those 3 areas of course, who they are as a person, and most and more for all is who they are and what their strengths are. But when it comes to dealing with some of the things that'll come out, that black light comes out and you see some of the issues, you're going to see some of the trauma, grief, and moral injury. So in my practice, it's been this, how can I target that? Of course, being a service member, I'm using targets and things, but it's this, how can I get to the center where of course, there's times where I have to deal with trauma and grief and moral injury separately, but that area where they intersect, how can I make the most effective treatment? Because the folks you're dealing with or working with are ending near of life. You don't have a lot of time. It's about providing the most effective treatments and engagements that you possibly can. And so I have that little center area you can see there. It's like more focused like a laser beam rather than a flashlight, rather than being all over the place. It's saying, how can I engage them in a way most effectively to help them die an honorable death, and do so in a way that's effective, empirically supported, and well researched. And that's the same military saying, you can see it here. We always say, aim small, miss small. So you aim small, you miss small, meaning you're more accurate. So I even have the sites. This is like a thing you could see, and I didn't speak to that. And the model that I use, it's compassion, empathy, which equals to targeted healing. And we're going to break down what compassion and empathy really means. And many of you are very good at it, but it's important for us to understand what it's like in the context of service members. So it's this part, you aim this with this and you get the targeted healing. And just to kind of highlight that, I have the sites. If anybody's fire weapon, for me, it's like common sense, natural. Like I know before I became a chaplain what it was like to fire a weapon over and over. But if for those who aren't aware of what it's like to fire a weapon, and I'm not saying you have to, or that, it may not be your thing. But just so you understand from a service member perspective, you have this hindsight and you have the foresight here. What you're doing is you're lining up the hindsight with the foresight, and that's how you aim accurately. And so for me, the model I use is it's compassion and empathy. Using compassion and empathy is how we're able to engage in a targeted way that's most effective. So compassion is just a deep awareness of the suffering of another, accompanied by the wish to relieve it. And the part that I added here is a self-compassion, because that's hopefully something that we are cultivating in the people we work with. It's that deep awareness of suffering of self, accompanied by the wish to relieve it. Because you're working with someone with moral injury, they're most likely thinking they're a monster or they're a horrible person, or what they've done is tragic. Maybe some aren't that bad. Maybe some are just, hey, I just want to work through this before I die. Or maybe some don't want to touch it and they just want to move on. But if you understand that part and helping cultivate that self-compassion, you understand the model from what I work from and from what some of the most effective interventions work from. And then empathy is just imagine and understand how someone might feel without necessarily having those feelings yourself. And that's key. And I put this intentionally here because she's like, oh, we're social workers, we're chaplains, we all know, but it's just good to go over the basics of what's the difference between pity, sympathy, and empathy. Because more often than not, more than we want to recognize, I even still engage in it sometimes, we don't realize how much we do the pity response. It's kind of that, I'm overwhelmed, I have compassion fatigue, I can't be emotionally connected, this is overwhelming for me. And maybe it's not like that for every patient, but sometimes we have those patients, right, where you feel more triggered, or you have more emotions come up and you feel more of that separation. Or if you ever find yourself saying, hey, I'm there, that's not what we want to think, right? But sometimes we feel like we are better than the people we're working with, whether we want to admit that or not. But if we find ourselves providing feedback, not feedback, but if we're giving advice, or if we're viewing the distressed person as incapable or powerless, most likely we're coming from a pity pointed perspective. And if you do that with most service members, my friend, I tell you, they will be turned off, they will shut down, they will not want to listen, because these people that you are working with have operated multi-million-dollar machines. They're very well capable, strong, dignant people who are approaching the end of life. And now if someone comes in and they're trying to give advice, or if they get the whiff at all that you're condescending to them, they will write you off very quickly. And I don't think anybody here would, but that's just a fair warning for all of us to keep that check in mind. Where sympathy, you can see it's that person who's stuck with them there. If a service member gets the idea that you are, if they have to comfort you, and I think as social workers, you probably understand this really well, but sim, it comes from the Latin term of same, S-Y-M, being stuck with the distressed person. It's where you relate with them, but you also hijack. You find yourself telling them too much of your story, or you also feel the distressed person is helpless, and so you're like there with them. But empathy on the last one is just more like, it's this dude right here who's hanging from the ground. It's like, I'm there and I see you, but I'm also not there stuck with you. I'm there to help you, assist you get up if you want, but I'm also here just to understand. It's seeing them as empowered, to say, hey, I know you're strong enough to get out of this situation. And so it's helpful to understand this model when you're working with service members. So you understand the compassion, this, hey, I see the desire, or I see the suffering in another, and I have the desire to relieve it, and helping them cultivate that within themselves. But then combining that with the empathy of being willing to understand and hear their story, it's what sets you up for most of that targeted healing. So some of these I'm going to start going through pretty quickly, because it's going to be understanding more than anything, and to help you and support you in your role. But this is just something to help me really understand the part of compassion I want to go over just real quickly. It's just this idea of compassion. Like when I went through the cancer treatment, they had this new treatment that was this immunotherapy, because I had the chemotherapy that was just like killing me, and I just made me feel horrible. It wasn't even killing the cancer because of my mutation, but they had this new immunotherapy called blinatumomab. Essentially what it does is it doesn't kill your other blood cells like chemotherapy. It specifically targets the cancer. It pairs up this cell, your immune system with the specific leukemia cell. It's pretty amazing that the research has come up. And so I see that as the compassion. No longer do people have to beat themselves up to change. They don't have to consider themselves as a horrible person and to really berate themselves, to have power control in order to say, hey, I'm making a change, I have to punish myself. It's no longer that model, like chemotherapy model. It's this part of, hey, compassion is the new model. Loving myself, loving others, that is the model. That's that pairing of the community, the safety, the vulnerability, and acceptance and connection. That it pairs it up. It's like that immunotherapy. It pairs it up with that moral injury or the trauma that helps with the most capable forms of healing. So Dunker's canon problem, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I feel like compassion is the missing piece. Just a real quick on this study, if you've ever heard of it. This research, the research folks, they gave participants this box full of tacks and a candle, and they said, I want you to stick this to the wall. And so almost all of them didn't even consider the box. They would just try to find all these various ways of melting the candle to stick it to the wall, which didn't work, or using the pin tacks. But it was not until they figured out, oh, if I use this box, I can just nail or put the pins in the box to the wall, and it'll help the candle stay up. It completes the task. And so it's this thinking outside the box of, hey, I can use this other method or this tool that actually will work, and it's way easier and it's way better. And so I feel like that's what the compassion does. The compassion is the box. It's that additional piece. So this leads to the model. I actually had a more in-depth version before, but I'm actually just going to break this down and give you something more practical. The first four are just things that hopefully, as social workers and chaplains who are on here, you're already incorporating. It's that, how do I build rapport with someone who's a service member? What questions do I ask? How do I talk? How do I build that relationship? How do I get into depth with someone who does share a morally injurious experience? How do I ask the right questions, or what do I say and do? And I'm actually going to refer to the We Honor Veterans, because I was going to start answering these questions and giving tips. But if you go to the We Honor Veterans website, they actually have like a little training slides for what are good questions to open up a discussion with a service member or veteran. And it says, what are some good questions to deepen the discussion? And then what are some good questions to specifically target or to deal with moral injury? So I'm not going to spend time with that. I'm going to encourage you to go to We Honor Veterans, go look it up, go see what they have there. And you say, oh, okay, these are some good questions to ask. So those first four of the rapport, reflection, review, and even some of the Reconstruction, you'll get with that. It's just that part of how do you help them build a relationship with them? How do you help them reflect and talk about it and review it in a way where they can look at it with different meaning? I'm going to spend my time focusing on the last three, but which will also help with the first four. So I'm going to fly through some of these. I'm going to provide you, I can say, let's get practical now. This is where I made the changes. So hopefully these are helpful for you. These are some things that have worked for me and have worked for others. But it helps to know the analogies, the understanding, the theoretical undergirdings, and then some practical interventions that you guys can utilize with the patients who are service members nearing the end of life. That's what I will complete on. I'm going to spend the rest of my time on. So shattered vase analogy, just to help you understand, a man named Stephen Joseph has a pretty cool analogy. This is actually a picture from my good friend's house, Rhonda. She doesn't know I'm sharing this, but she's on here, and we have a pretty good relationship, but it's a very cool, I don't know if you want to call it mural or whatever else, but this is like a broken vase turned into a mural. Pretty amazing. I was very fascinated when I saw it, and it really correlated with this analogy. And the analogy goes, imagine you have this vase that breaks to the ground and shatters. We're talking about not just like a crack or a minor break, but it just breaks and shatters. The three options that you have are: one, try to put it back together; two, create something new; or three, you can just throw it away and give up. And you can see how that's symbolistic, not symbolistic, that's not even a real word, how that symbolizes life quite a bit, where it's like this life shatter, it could be like a morally injurious event, a trauma, whatever else. That's like the vase shattering. So the first option is trying to put it back together. I don't know how many times we try to do that, where it's I should have done this, I would have done that. And this pertains to moral injury and trauma. I wish that this would have been different, or even grief. And we try to put this vase back together. But if anybody's been through trauma, moral injury, or grief, you know that it's never going to be the same, especially for major losses. Just never going to be the same. So that first option is off there. And then I go to the third option now of giving up. Do I just throw it all away? And for some service members, that is the option they take. It is suicide, it is death, it is just checking out for the rest of their life. And that is an option that they have, and some choose to take it. But that second option, or I say the last option, is how can we take this shattered vase and turn it into something different, even something more strong? How can we make meaning? And if you're working with someone who's been through more injury, you could see, as long as you have this as your theoretical undergirding, sometimes you can even share this with a patient or that you're working with. But it's this idea of how can we do something different as you're approaching the end of life? How can we help you? And I speak openly with the service members I'm with. How can we help you have an honorable death? How can we make sense of this, or not make sense of this, but at least create something different and new? Another analogy I will throw out there, I'm just going to throw out a few of these, would be the changing the poison in medicine. And the funny thing is, when I was researching this one, the yew plant, it's very poisonous. Countless people have died, and animals who have eaten this. And I was like, we don't even have these here. I was like, this is probably not pertinent. But the funny thing is, the very next day, I was just down South Temple, that road near our capital, and I saw like multiple yew plants. And I was like, okay, so these do exist. But the fascinating thing is, like, they're very deadly, but they actually use it for quite a bit of medicine for cancers and other ailments. So it's this idea of maybe some experience in life was really brought a lot of death, but it's saying, how can I take this experience that brought death in my life and brought me down, and how can I change it into something that's medicine that helps me find healing, that helps me find some kind of hope, even just a glimmer? It's about that process that helps that change. So it's helpful for you. You can share, or you can keep this as your own theoretical undergirding, but helps you understand the process of what's taking place when you're working with someone with more injury. You're not going to get rid of that plant. It's a matter of saying, how can I take this? You don't clear it up. It's not about cleaning a slate. It's not about rectifying. It's not about, some instances it is about rectifying, but a lot of times it's not, I can't change this. It's a matter of how can I transform this into something beautiful and new? So another analogy, building on garbage. That was the analogy I was going to open up with this, but I decided to incorporate it with some of the other powerful analogies. This is Mount Trashmore. Mount Trashmore Park in Virginia. You can see it on the right. It used to be one of the most dirty landfills in the world. They didn't get rid of most of the garbage. They actually just built on top of it. If you get the idea where this is going, some of these veteran service members, there's things that they have done that they will always regret, that will never leave them, a permanent stain. It's not about trying to erase it. The ones who get stuck in trying to erase mode or fix are going to get stuck more into it. And then some will either take their lives, or they just get in this depression, they want to check out. But if you can help people transition to that, hey, you don't have to change it. You don't have to do anything, but how can we transition this to, how can we build on top of it? What can we do? Let's leave it there, let's not put the energy there. How can we change this to something new? Another analogy is converting waste to power. And I'm just sharing with you guys some tools. I was pretty fascinated about this because at the time I was actually like, hey, what do we do with all of our garbage? Why do we separate it with recycling? Because every time I think of the separating like recycling and garbage, I think, hey, we want to recycle and reuse these items, and that's the most important part. Although recycling is the most important part, another crucial part of this is separating that garbage that can be used in the refinery process for building energy. I didn't know that 40% of homes and institutions in the United States run on power that came from garbage. If you can see how this relates to the moral injury, it's not about getting rid of that garbage. It's saying, how can I change this into something that can be helpful and new? I'm just gonna keep going. There's another one. I can't remember the name of this project, but they do it in Italy. I wouldn't recommend sharing this with your patients unless you feel like a really strong desire to do so. But just kind of helping that part. Hey, you have someone who's died, and they actually create a pod, and they'll plant a tree, and the tree gets its nutrients from this dead body. So I know that can be kind of gruesome to some people, but for most people, just if you understand this part of this, if you can understand these analogies I'm pointing out to you, can understand that the what's happening with moral injury and what kind needs to happen. Whereas this dead body could represent their dead experiences, the things they've done or seen. The things aren't going to go away, but how can we use those things to become nutrients for something that's going to bring lasting life? So keep going. If someone ever says, you guys probably met with patients who have said, I just feel haunted by these experiences. I feel like I've been haunted. I've actually had people who've asked me to do exorcisms who have said, hey, I feel like there's just something who's just following me, And so based on your theoretical undergirdings, maybe some of you religiously, I don't want to violate the tenets of anybody's faith, may feel like, hey, maybe there really is a haunting and there needs to be an exorcism. My own personal belief is, hey, there's some psychology things going on. The mind's going to do what it can to make sense of the experiences they've been through in the past. And a lot of times that's going to follow them. But anytime I get someone who talks about haunting, this is an opportunity for me to engage in conversation and not to avoid it. I just say haunting. Oh my gosh, I could see based on what you've been through in the past, how that would be really difficult. And it would feel like you're being haunted, and just really validate. And I'll go with them. And eventually gets to the point where they'll say, this is the worst thing ever. But I'll get to a point, I'm not trying to make it positive. I'll say something along the lines of, hey, it seems like you're being haunted. It seems like there's something in your life that's telling you something, or it's indicating that you need to talk about something, or however you decide to word it. And it turns into a very beneficial conversation in most circumstances. Prepare yourself if you get into those kind of conversations, because it's going to get to a deep level. You just prepare yourself to say, hey, I can, and I will, and I'm just here to be present and not fix, which is huge. Here's just another analogy, transforming grief you can use. I'm going through these now. Top bottom, oh my gosh, anger is such a key, core, amazing tool to be able to use, and it's a healing. If you have someone who's cranky, grumpy, ornery, angry, this is an opportunity. It's not the, sometimes we get into the hospice mode. I know I've done it myself, where we want to make people feel better and have them feel better, but sometimes going through the pain and going through the darkness is the way to feel better, even in the short run. Someone experiences anger, it's easy to bring up the analogy, like, yeah, just like this weed, it seems like your anger is that weed. It seems like it's taking up a lot of your life. It could be even toxic. It seems like it's really affecting you. And, you validate it, talk with them, go through all those things. And then it gets to the point of, I wonder what's below the weed. What is the weed hiding? What are some of the other emotions? Because as we know, anger is always a secondary emotion. And in almost every circumstance, we get to the bottom of the weed, and there'll be some kind of sadness or pain or fear or shame. And there's usually tears that are there. And when the tears come, one of my key terms I always say, and I'm giving you guys my tools, is I see the tears, what's going on behind the tears. And when you validate the tears come more, and then more emotion that comes with it. And you just have these healing experiences where I'm with them as a co-journey person, and I'm just with them along the way. And it gives them a chance. Now I call it top bottom top approach, because they have this invective anger, which then turns to the sadness and the pain, which then can turn into the healthy anger of this, like, I'm determined. There is justice, but I don't have to blame and criticize myself anymore. So I have a whole tool methodology behind this. This could be a whole presentation on itself, this top on top approach, but I'm just laying these out. If any of you guys have more questions and you want to follow up with this, let me know. I'm happy to talk with people. I'm happy to answer emails. I'm happy to be with you all and share anything I have. If it's anything that's going to help service members, I will dedicate the time to do it. Another analogy is battle of Verdun. If you don't know about this history from World War I, look this up. Oh my gosh, millions of casualties, millions of rounds of ammo. This line was decimated. This was just like the represents the worst of any type of war that's within our time, with the amount of people that died and casualties, and just the land was destroyed. In all the articles I read, one of the key things that came out was there was a change in trajectory. There was this land will never be used. It's a waste. And you can see if someone's been through the worst amount of moral injury possible and they haven't killed themselves already and they're still here and they're with you on hospice and they're sharing stuff, there's an easy way to not easy way. I said, there's a good way to validate this. The Battle of Verdun is one we'll talk about, because it's amazing to see the transformation they've had in the land. They don't expect it to ever be fully usable until like 2250 or something. It's like projected way out in the future, but every day they're getting these rounds that were left over. It's a huge progress, or huge project they're working on in France. It's just crazy if you research this history. But if you see in the context of the eyes of the service member, they're the veteran, there's this idea of, hey, I've been through the worst things ever, but as long as my trajectory is going in a different direction, I'm heading in that direction, then maybe I'm okay. Maybe I can find healing like this land is finding healing. So I'm just giving you guys tools. Another one, if you're not from Sugar House or from Utah, another analogy you can use. This is actually a really powerful ritual that I'll do. Sugar House Park is such a beautiful place. My favorite place. I put hundreds of miles in that park, running and spending time with my family, living ducks, flowers, trees. They do all these beautiful designs. Lots of people go there. But people don't really know, a lot of people don't know the history of Sugar House Park. It actually used to be a prison. It used to be a prison. If you can listen in with your spiritual ears here, it used to be a prison. It was desolate. People died there. They did executions there at this place. It was a place of captivity. But through the process, it took them a while to make this process. I think it was like in the 1960s, they transformed it into a park. This place that meant captivity and death and executions transformed into something life-giving. And so as we get to the ritual parts here, I actually do a arrival riding ritual with the service members in groups, or I'll do it with them individually, where I will go to Sugar House Park. I find the perfect rocks that are flat they can ride on, and I'll go pick them out. I'll meet with a service member, and after I've kind of find out what some of their moral injuries are, I'll just say, hey, from this experience, after we've processed it and talked about it, what's one thing that you want to let go? What's one thing that you want to release? And I want you to write it on this side of the rock. And they'll go and they'll take their time. Sometimes it's a paragraph, sometimes it's a word. A lot of times it's something like guilt and shame or remorse or disconnection. It could be whatever it is. But then, I'll kind of blow some of their minds sometimes and say, on the other side of the rock, what's something that you want to take away from this experience? What's something that you learned? What's one way you've grown? And usually it's the aspect of like, wow, I lost someone during this experience, but I also gained a new family. I'm really close with these other service members who are still alive. They're my family. Or it could be some other way. I could give you all sorts of examples of ways people connect with this. And they write it on the rock, one side and the other, and we'll usually spend time talking about it. And it turns into this awesome conversation. Most circumstances, usually tears are shed, and I'll ask the same questions like, hey, I see the tears. What's going on behind the tears? And we just go with it. And then at the end, what I'll do, if they're mobile, we'll go to the park and they'll put it back in the river, really symbolizing like eventually it's going to wash off that permanent mark on those rocks. They get to see it going back to this place. It's this really cool, like intervention ritual, I guess you could say, of healing that takes place. If your hospice patient is not able to do it, what I would do is I'll take it back to the park for them. And if they need help riding on the rock, I can help them ride on the rock. I'll take it to the park and I'll take pictures of what I did and where I put it and share a story, or I can even create a little handout, whatever you want to do. And you take that back to your patient and you say, this is what I did for you. And for a lot of them, you can see not only are they impressed that you're going out of your way to do something for them, they're also this ritual, this doing something physical that represents something emotional and spiritual that brings a lot of healing and change for these folks. You can see a difference in their face. So that's just an example of one ritual that I use based off of this. Let me share some others. If you're getting into creative expression, some easy things to do that social workers already do. I see some of these things that social workers do that's amazing, like going through someone's photo album and talking about pictures. You'd be amazed. Like if someone has some time of a moral injury, you could say, do you have a song that reminds you of that time, or of a good time at least? Let's listen to that song together. And that sound of the music, as you guys know, in the brain, it just triggers stuff, and they'll talk and they'll express. And sometimes they'll want to talk about the pain, but sometimes they'll want to talk about the meaning and purpose You can arrange a special meal. I'll tell you what, if you have a special meal that reminds them of a time that either empowered them or remind them of a moral injury, it's a good time to process and to talk. Not only that, you get to break bread and share a meal with them. It helps target the grief, the moral injury, and the trauma. Like I said, we're trying to find that center point that targets all of them. And you're finding the most effective interventions because you only have so much time left with these folks. So you want to do the things that are most effective. And I found that rituals are one of the most effective things you can do. And I'm glad that it's a part of this pastoral narrative disclosure. Looking through pictures, you can do poetry for some of those people who like that. Some people won't. Some service members will be like, don't touch me with that shit. Oh, sorry my language. I apologize. I do swear. I do work with the special forces guys. As a side note here, it's kind of a funny thing. I can explain the most simple concept to these special forces guys and not swear, and they'd be like, I don't get what you're saying. Like, what's going on? But on the other end, I could explain the most complex thing and I throw in an F-bomb or, I'll say another swear word and they're like, I get it. I'm tracking you, chaplain. I get it. So it's just funny. So I apologize. Swearing's kind of ingrained in my language. So it helps get the point across when you work with certain populations. So some won't be into it, but there's script writing. You do art, objects and symbols. Like someone will bring something that they'll want to show me an old war jacket or a coin or something like a leaf or a rock that they took from overseas or that they had back down. And you'd be amazed, just having some kind of object there that represents something physical can provide some of the coolest conversations and the best conversations. One thing that you could do with only certain patients that you feel like would be okay with is having them write their own obituary. Having them write their own obituary. This is not for everybody, but for some who do, it's very powerful. You can see initially when they write it, there is the shame, and they'll write out the horrible things that's came out, and they'll give you a chance to talk about it and process. And then you can have other conversations where you're like, what would you like your obituary to look like? And it's kind of that, hey, if you wake up the next day, and things could be changed and be the way you want it to be, that kind of thing, but it turns into these really powerful conversations because you want to have these powerful conversations before they die. Empty chair, I won't spend a lot of time on that. Some people will really be interested in that. It's a matter of, hey, if they've offended someone or done something horribly atrocious, it's a matter of having a conversation as if the person was there sitting in that chair. And what would you say to them? What would you say to that person that you did this horrible thing to, or that you killed, or that you raped, or, you'll have some pretty explicit things come out. If you build that rapport and they want to talk to you, those things will come out. Just other ways you can perform your rituals. Like if someone does like a moral injury timeline, they do some kind of, any kind of disclosure of anything, and they want to do something physical that represents something emotional and spiritual. I always have my burning pot I take with me. They'll read it off, we'll talk about it, cry, all those other things. I'll ask them questions, what's going on behind the tears, we process it, and then, would you like to burn it? And they're like, yes, I would like to burn it. And you'd be just amazing when you do a ritual or something physical, it just makes the biggest difference. There's some kind of finalization. You can use dissolving paper, have them write stuff that they want to let go. Paper baptisms is what I call them. Some people do atrocious things. It doesn't have to be religious, but it's just like, hey, you did this thing, let's baptize that paper. And you can do it with any kind of water. So these are just ideas I'm flowing out there. Please use any of these. I can explain any more of these in more detail that you would like. Rock writing ritual, I told you about that one. Writing one thing on one side, one thing on the other. It could be like for a moral injury, or it could be like, I do these for memorial sometimes where it's like, what's one thing that you want to let go based on this person that you lost? And then what's one thing you want to remember? And a lot of times it's connection, and it turns into really awesome conversations. Doing something physical that represents something emotional and spiritual. Plant a seed exercise is an awesome one. You can give them 2 seeds and say, hey, what's the one thing you feel like your life is growing into, or has it grown into? And, they'll talk about the invective, and then you can add on the other hand, what is something you want to pass on to the next generation, or that you want to have grow? Some people will actually want to grow a physical tree. It's pretty amazing. You want to talk about doing something physical that represents something emotional and spiritual. Someone who's getting ready to die and helping them plant a tree is an amazingly profound and spiritual experience. Contextualizing is pretty cool if you can go out there. This is another one you can do. You have them write down the thing that's bothering them on a rock, and you have them hold in front of your face, and you're like, what do you see? And you're like, all I see is this. And then you say, put it down on the ground now, and next to this beautiful river and this awesome landscape. And then now what do you see? And they're like, okay, I see all these other things. And it's just a matter of contextualizing, hey, their experiences from deployment and things that they've been through that were horrible, and doing it in a way where it's say, but there's also these other things along with it. It doesn't take away this rock, doesn't take away what happened, but it does help you see everything else that's going on. So awesome conversations that go on 3-chair compassion exercise. Not everyone wants to do this. Not everybody can do it physically, but there's this part of, I want to give them permission to hear what the criticizer has to say about themselves. And you have them switch roles, and I want to hear what the victim side of them has to say. And then this is the powerful part where you'd say, hey, as if you're speaking to someone who's your friend, what would you say to them if that was their experience? And you give them a chance to be a compassion giver. And they say things they wouldn't normally say to themselves. And it's usually the surprising event for them where suddenly they're saying nice and kind things and validating themselves rather than trying to say the harshest things that they can say. It doesn't take away that they did something bad, but it does give them a chance and opportunity, permission to do something that's really positive and healthy for themselves. You can do moral injury timelines where they write out everything that's happened and they feel that they did bad or had bad happen to them, and they get a chance to talk about and process it. So this works really well on the social worker side if that's something you're interested. And then do a ritual with it. Do a burning, float it away, bury it with dissolving paper. Do something physical to help them move on. This is what it really boils down to is these people want to die. They have these issues that come up. They've put under the ground. How can you help them not necessarily move past or get over it, but how can you help them live to the most possible way for the time they have left, but also die honorably? It's just about helping them make that transition. Snakeskin shed's another cool one. It's an excuse to get a gift, get your company to pay for it. You bring some snakeskin shed. Usually when I built Rapport and I've talked with them, it's just a way of saying, hey, what are the things you want to let go? And you have a little snakeskin thing in these little vials that you can give them as a gift and say, hey, you've done some amazing work. You can validate them, or you can say, hey, I know you're trying to do this. Like, these are some of the things you want to let go from your past. And you can talk about the snakeskin shed. What it represents to them, let them take you to where it represents to them. For some people, like the snake coming out represents death. It's their spirit going out. It's their new life, and they're shedding some of these things that happen in their physical life behind them. Or for some, they're saying, hey, the snake coming out is me living the rest of my life. I want to live the rest of my life to the fullest while letting go of all this other stuff. So you can see, let them take you what symbolism is. So another one, here's some things for renewal. If people are trying to make amends, or not, like I said, there's planting a tree. You can help someone donate to a cause or some other kind of donation. Some people want to do that. Or for those of you who are in there who are good with numbers and crunching, there may be people who want to set up a will. There may be people who are trying to set up a trust. Some of the things that they can do, even though they've done bad things or bad things happen to them, or they have their regrets and things that come up before the end of life, it's a way of saying, hey, I can do something big and something that makes meaning before I die. And so there's ways to assist them with that. Performing an act of service could be something really simple. I've seen people do a wide variety of things, writing a simple note to someone, making a phone call, just cutting out a thing or making one last message. There's just ways to make it very meaningful for them to focus on that part of, I'm a good person still. I can still do good things, even though these bad things have happened in the past. Reconnecting with a loved one and writing a letter, which I'll end off on here. These can be really powerful. And I want to save this last moment just to say, hey, you can write a letter to yourself. You can write a letter of confession, letter of apology, letter of anger, accountability. These are ones that they can send to people, or they can not, and they can burn it and do a ritual. So there's all sorts of things. I could spend a whole thing on doing letter writing. Please ask me afterwards if you have questions. But it comes back to, as I'm concluding, is the saying, love them home, help them find honor in death, help them find life and what they have left, to shed some of that weight. Do it in the most effective ways. Use rituals. Help them find renewal where renewal is possible. I just am so grateful that you were here and that you took this time. If you haven't seen We Honor Veterans website, if you're not a partner, become a partner. If you haven't seen the website, go to the website. It'll explain some of these things better and give you more details. So if you become a professional at this, not only will it help your hospice company or the company you work for, advertising, all those other things, but most importantly, it's going to help you with helping service members die an honorable death. But that's all I have. My time is up. So I will stop sharing my screen. I apologize. I took the full amount rather than leaving time for questions. If you have questions, you can email me, call me, whatever else. I have my contact information.
Wonderful job, Jeremy. Holy cow. This was absolutely remarkable. Thank you so much for sharing your life stories, opening up your heart, and giving us so much great practical things that we can do to help veterans and work through them. I actually never knew that about Sugar House Park. That was really neat. And the different rituals, the practical ideas that you gave to us, absolutely phenomenal. next month we will be doing this again. I hope everyone can attend again. We will be having it on Zoom, more than likely ongoing for a little while. Also, if you have not been able to, if you wanted to have the CE events or CE credits, please again, make sure you have sent over your information to me. I will stay on here for a couple more minutes. And if someone has a couple of questions for a couple more minutes to ask Jeremy. Jeremy, do you still have a couple more time?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I'll hang out. Like I said, I know I expended all my time, but if anybody wants to take after, I'm happy to answer questions.
Jeremy, thank you. That was so great. We really appreciate your time. And also I wanted to mention, if you in the audience have a topic that you would like to share, as Jeremy has, we would love to have a call for presenters for this meeting and would appreciate very much. HHAU also has a caregiving organization for professional caregivers. And if you have a topic that you would like to share at that meeting, it's the first Wednesday of the month. So we would look forward to hearing from you if you have a topic you'd like to share.
Were there any questions that were prying to someone? Yes, Dixie. You're on mute.
Take it off mute.
Dixie, you're on mute. There we
I
are.
just wondered how he went about getting his chaplain license. Did he do it right through the service, or did he go to a chaplaincy school? What did he do?
Oh, thanks, Dixie. Yeah, it's all of the above. Yeah. So the Army has their own certification program, but you have to get undergraduate degree, graduate degree in some kind of divinity or religious studies. Mine was like military chaplaincy focused. And then if you want to work in the civilian world, I have to do extra supervision. Like it's 1,600 hours to 2,000 hours of supervision and credentialing to become a board certified chaplain. But in the Army world, they have their own certification that I have. It's like 4.5 months of training, and you have to go through their sessioning program and all that fun stuff. So it's kind of a long road, but totally worth it. But I like having the different credentialings. It's nice to have experience in different areas.
Thank you.
Anyone
I
else?
have, yes, I have a question, Jeremy. I know a few people who've been through a soul retrieval ritual. Have you ever participated in that or know much about it?
I have not. You have to send me information on it. You can see I'm still like, I love this topic and I'm still learning new stuff every day. And I know chaplains and social workers, you have so many resources.
And I was going to say, it sounds very woo-woo, but I know the veterans, the VA has been using it for a long time. So I'm just fascinated. There's a few books on it. And I didn't get your email address. So how do I follow up with you?
Let me put it up in here. I'll give you my, I'll just give you my military address because I checked that one. Jeremy. I'm writing in the chat right now.
Oh, thank you. And great presentation. Got so much out of it. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I'm so bad at multitasking. Army. Okay, I just put it in. I'll even give you guys my cell number because I'm pretty like, you want to contact me, call me, text me. I'm cool with that too. Just don't prank call me.
Can we get Elizabeth's also?
Yes, I can definitely. I'll give you my cell phone number.
Okay.
The best way to reach.
The sad thing with when I work with bereavement in Homestead Health and Hospice in Rexburg, Idaho, is most of the veterans that come in will be in early stages of dementia. And so they'll go in and out of dementia. But it's talking to them. I've learned so much is talking to them about this, because I know many of them are Vietnam veterans from the early time in Vietnam. And I can imagine that most of them do have some very tearful, sad moments that they've spent. I just know from peers my own age that have been in Vietnam, they don't want to talk about it.
No, totally understandable too. Yeah, some of them won't. Some will take it to their grave. As you guys know even more than I do. Some of you have years of experience in hospice. You could probably tell me way more stories than I could even share. I just appreciate you being there for when they do open up, because it's for some, it is that black light, like, right, where they don't want to talk about their lives, but sometimes before they die, they do want to talk about it, or you have an opportunity, that rare glimpse, but some of them won't. I think you're spot on. But I just appreciate you guys coming and like having that desire to serve service members before they die.
And we're also, as long as you're okay, Jeremy, we're going to post this onto YouTube on the HHAU's website.
Sure.
So you'll be able to access this recording. So if you want to go back to it, because this was so much content. Oh my gosh, and it was so good. Absolutely loved it. Holy cow. Are there any other additional questions?
I apologize too. Like I said, I totally switched tracks last night. Like I was like, I gotta do something more practical. It was just like a lot of information. I was like, no, let's give them something they can use. So
It was great.
It was phenomenal. Yes. Yeah. And I so appreciate everyone that's today too. Thank you so much.
I have a quick question. Someone forwarded me this information for this seminar. What is the name of your organization?
So
what is HH? No, not the
okay,
HH.
gotcha.
Yeah, whatever.
HHAU is Home Care and Hospice Association of Utah.
Oh, okay.
And we are the bereavement group.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bereavement division.
Yep.
Well, I really appreciated that. Is there a way to like get on your mailing list or something?
Yeah, absolutely. So just send me a text with your email. Were you on there already that you sent maybe for CE?
I did send it. I did
Okay.
send it for CE credit.
Okay. Everyone who's going to be asking for the CE credits, we're going to add them to our email list. So you'll be able to get these monthly events that we're going to be having for the CE credits.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Sunny.
When Jeremy stated that there were several things that could be a whole topic of discussion, we might want to consider having him come back and discuss in further detail some of those items that he said would be another conversation if he would be willing.
I would be happy to. Like I said, there's some things I think you guys learn really well at end of life that work well for you and for others. But these are some things that, others have tried and I've tried that work well, and I'd love to expound on. Like I said, I just kind of shot them all out there, and if people are interested, they can like ask more information, but I'd be happy to do more trainings.
That would be great. I think we would love to have you come back.
Well, I'm going to
so much. Oh, sorry, Jeremy, I just wanted to thank you so much for taking this on. I know you've got a lot on your plate with your job and dealing with your cancer and treatments. And this was a lot of time on your end. And so you have no idea how appreciative I am and how much I really enjoyed and learned from you today. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Livette. We're in the same chaplain chapter, and she's the one who invited me to this training. So thanks, Livette. Anything I can do to help provide extra good service to service members, I'm happy to do. So thanks, Livette.
Yes, thanks.
Well, I'm going to pause this recording unless there is any more questions that someone had. All right.
Thanks, everyone.